If there was only one thing in the world that could scare Tony, then there's only pepper pots. If the attack was aimed at him, then Tony Stark would definitely be in front of everyone. Tell the attackers to come if you can, Tony is not afraid of you. But what if it was Tony himself, the attackers, who started targeting Peipo? Then Tony would definitely choose to let the danger happen to him. In fact, except for Su Che and Alexander Pierce and Sitwell, everyone, including Nick Fury, believed that the person who blew up Su Che and Steve's apartment was Hydra. Their purpose is pure revenge, so since it is revenge from Hydra, Tony Stark thought that as long as he was with Su Che and Steve, then the group of Hydra will target themselves instead of implicating Peipo. As for attracting the target of hatred to oneself, will it be dangerous? What a joke, if those guys can get rid of themselves in front of Su Che and Steve, then you will accept your fate. Anyway, as long as it doesn't implicate Peipo. So these 2 days, Tony Stark has been with Su Che and Steve, including when Sitwell in front of him came over. So, you mean Su and Steve's apartment, for helping S.H.I.E.L.D. capture a bunch of Hydra elites, and destroying Sokovia Hydra base, city bombed by Zixia. And then S.H.I.E.L.D. is going to make amends to Su and Steve? Looking at Sitwell with glasses in front of him, Tony Stark didn't know why, but he just felt that he didn't like him from the bottom of his heart. Obviously this guy showed great respect to Su Che and Steve, but Tony always felt that this guy's smile was very hypocritical. It's like, just like Obadiah Stine. Yes, Mr. Stark. Seeing that Su Che and Steve didn't speak, Tony Stark asked. This Sitwell nodded with a smile. After all, whether it is Mr. Su or Captain Rogers, it is because they eliminated an enemy for S.H.I.E.L.D. that they will be retaliated. Though, we're not sure if it's Hydra who launched the revenge. But whether it's compensation or a thank you gift, the Secretary General specially approved the place on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. We bought a townhouse as a gift to the 2 of you. Also ask Mr. Su and Captain Rogers to accept it. While talking, Sitwell took out all the real estate certificates and handed them to Su Che and Steve Rogers. Obviously, as long as 2 people are willing to accept, then the townhouse over there belongs to Su Che and Steve. I have my own house. Looking at the real estate documents on the table in front of him, Steve Rogers was silent for a while. I'm in Brooklyn. Okay. Mr. Sitwell, please go back and thank us for what you said. The Secretary General was selected. Before Steve could finish speaking, Su Che interrupted directly, and took over the house happily. Hearing Su's interruption, Steve turned his head to look at him. Although he didn't know why Su interrupted himself. But Steve knew that Su was definitely not the kind of person who was greedy for money. Since he chose to accept it, he should have his own reasons. Okay, Mr. Su, I can go, and I will definitely bring your thanks to Mr. Secretary General. Seeing that Su Che accepted the gift from his side happily, Sitwell froze for a moment, then a smile filled his face. Wait until Sitwell is gone. Then Steve asked Su Che, Su, what's going on here? I just want to see what tricks they want to play. Seeing Steve looking at himself with some puzzlement, Yindi picked up his coffee and took a sip. Dude, you mean, this guy is also a member of Hydra? Tony Stark on the side immediately reacted when he heard Su Che say this. Seeing Su Che nodded slightly, Tony Stark analyzed seriously. The man offered to give you the villa, nothing more than 2 points. Or, they want to win you over. After all, they don't know. You know the identities of this group of people very well. Or after you and Steve live in, they give you a big townhouse that wants to blow you and Steve to death. However, I think the second point can be given up, because your strength is at stake here. And they gave you the villa, and then blow it up. Isn't it obvious that they poured dirty water on themselves? Having said that, Tony Stark picked up the phone and made a call while laughing. The phone was connected, and Wani Stark glanced at the villa numbers of Su Che and Steve. Then he directly asked the other end of the phone to buy all the surrounding villas of Su Che and Steve's villa. Watching Tony Stark's deep pockets, Steve asked curiously, Tony, don't you think it's best for me to do this? Looking at Steve, Tony Stark shook the phone in his hand. No matter what those bloody bastards want to do, let's play with them. Money? Hey, what Tony Stark lacks most is money. It's okay if they really want to use money to win over Su, but what if they don't? Although I said just now that the chance of them gathering together to attack is very small, we have to guard against it. Since they want to play, then we deliberately gather together to play a big game with them. If not, then I will buy all the surrounding villas, and it will be convenient for us to meet in the future. Listening to Tony's deep pockets, buying a few villas around is as easy as buying a few cups of coffee. Steve and Su Che looked at each other, neither of them spoke. According to Tony Stark's wealth, buying a nearby villa is indeed as simple as buying a few cups of coffee. No, it should be said that it is easier for this guy to buy a few villas than a few cups of coffee. Because this guy comes to his coffee shop for coffee and never pays the bill. But the only good thing is that Tony knows that Selena, the new store manager of his coffee shop, is getting a commission. And there is a younger sister who is about to go to college to support. So Tony Stark gives several times the price of coffee every time he tips. It made Selena both happy and suspicious. Obviously he is so rich, every time he will throw a tip of 2 kings and 100 to himself. But, why not pay for the coffee? At the same time, inside S.H.I.E.L.D. 27 exposed Hydra members caught. Looking at Nick Fury, Natasha Romanoff said. The 27 Hydra members arrested in the past 2 days, no matter how you look at it, are related to the list that Congressman Stern brought up last time. It's very similar to being arrested when the identity of the superior was exposed, and then these low-level Hydra members were in chaos for a while, and they didn't know what to do. Then he exposed his identity and was arrested by us. And among them, 7 more are related to our S.H.I.E.L.D. Definitely, the highest level among these 7 people is a S.H.I.E.L.D. level 5 agent named Semik Torin, commonly known as Passer-by level. Hearing Natasha Romanoff's report, Nick Fury glanced at the 22 names on the list. Natasha Romanoff, do you believe it? Throwing the list on the table casually, Nick Fury laughed. What a simple way, thinking that launching some scapegoats can divert our attention. Hearing Nick Fury's sneer, Natasha Romanoff shrugged his shoulders. Who knows, but I don't care, I'll blow them off anyway. Catch a little today, catch a little tomorrow, and one day I will catch all of Hydra. Actually, I care more about Su Che. I took a look at the list of Hydra members arrested by Natasha Romanoff in the past 2 days. Nick Fury didn't care. Even if there are members of S.H.I.E.L.D. in the list of 27 people. But after all, it is passerby. It's just a scapegoat launched by Hydra to divert the target after Su Che's apartment was bombed. What Nick Fury is more concerned about is what is the plan that Su Che mentioned in the diary updated 2 days ago. Natasha Romanoff, you should have seen Sus' latest diary entry. What do you think? Facing Nick Fury's inquiry, Natasha Romanoff shook her head, no opinion. I don't know what Sus' plan is for now, but I will try my best to keep him in our world. Even though, what he wants the most right now is that 457 is just to use the status of a spiritual mentor to make the Avengers alliance into a team as soon as possible. Speaking of this, Natasha Romanoff stood up and looked at Nick Fury. Director, you know, members of the first-generation Avengers alliance are very important to Sue. As for me, among the diaries, the one that is most special to Sue. Just like what he wrote, I in the parallel world was the one who led him to become one of the first-generation Avengers alliance, and the only one who sacrificed in the past timeline. What are you going to do? Watching Natasha Romanoff stand up, Nick Fury stared at her with his only remaining good eye. It's nothing, but in this world full of flowers, pick one and put it in his heart. After finishing speaking, Natasha Romanoff simply turned around and left. Watching Natasha Romanoff leave neatly, Nick Fury suddenly laughed. In this world full of flowers, pluck one and put it in his heart. Interesting. Although I don't know what Natasha Romanoff is going to do. But Nick Fury wasn't prepared to ask. He believes Natasha Romanoff can do it. Just like what Su Che once wrote in the Black Gold Diary. Natasha Romanoff, it's different for him after all. After more than an hour. So, your house was bombed too? Inside a villa on the Upper East Side. Listening to Natasha Romanoff's words, Steve's expression gradually became serious. It seems that this group of forces hiding in the dark are really after us. First me and Sue's apartment, then Natasha Romanoff, then it should be Lin Tay and Tony? Damn it. Listening to Steve's analysis, Tony Stark's expression became serious. I knew things were not that simple. Fortunately, I asked JARVIS to mobilize the Stark Liaise satellite to monitor the surroundings of my villa 24 hours a day. If there is any danger, then JARVIS will report to me as soon as possible. Speaking of this, Tony Stark suddenly raised his head to look at Suche and Steve. No. These guys are too brave, even dare to blow up Natasha Romanoff's apartment. I thought that as long as I stayed by the two of you, those guys would target me. But it doesn't look safe now. Speaking of this, Tony Stark stood up and said, I have to go and bring Pepper here, now I can feel at ease only if I stay with us. Watching Tony get up and prepare to go out, Steve quickly said, Tony, I'll go with you. Well, let's go together. Natasha Romanoff also stood up. We are together, even in the face of power, we can kill the enemy at the first time. Otherwise, once Tony and Steve are attacked on the road, even if Pipo can be protected, I'm worried. Then go together. Suche also got up and agreed with Natasha Romanoff's words. Thanks, everyone. Seeing that the other three people also got up, ready to go with him. Tony Stark suddenly felt a little moved. We're all friends, so that's how it should be, Tony. I believe that one day if Sue and Natasha Romanoff and I encounter difficulties and dangers, then you won't sit back and watch, will you? Looking at Tony, Steve reached out and squeezed Tony's shoulder. On the other hand, Suche hugged Natasha Romanoff lightly with his arm in his arms. Quietly, our Tsunere genius is so rarely touched. Wow, this is really not easy. So buddy, do you think it's good to have friends? What? Do you want to cry? Do you want me to get you some tissues? Tony Stark, who was a little touched. After hearing Suche's deliberate ridicule, he immediately rolled his eyes and made an international friendly gesture to Suche. I figured it out, as long as I'm in front of you, I can't take advantage of my mouth at all. I have a poisonous tongue. I'm not as poisonous as you. A few people walked out while talking and laughing. Come to the garage. Tony Stark said suddenly. Hey, everyone, I suddenly thought of something. Anyway, I bought all the villas in the surrounding area, why don't we turn this place into our base? I can see it, from now on, maybe we people will have to face some problems together. So if we are together, then we should take care of each other, right? With that said, Tony Stark looked at Natasha Romanoff. Natasha Romanoff, anyway, your apartment was bombed. Why don't you just live here? Otherwise, this place is empty. Hearing what Tony said, Natasha Romanoff held Suche's arm and thought for a while, then smiled and said, okay, I didn't expect that after the apartment was bombed, I could still pick up a villa. I want to be in a row with Suche's villa. That. I think Wanda will love this design. Hearing what Natasha Romanoff said, Steve laughed and said, no problem, then I'll give up the East Villa. Then it's settled. Listening to everyone agreeing to his plan, Tony clapped his hands. Natasha Romanoff, it's up to you whether Barton is willing to come over. Hide Wanda and Pietro there. While talking, it habitually sat in the co-pilot position. Tony has very few friends, especially those he can trust. So now that Suche and Steve appear, he really cherishes them. It's like destroying the Hydra base in Sokovia, because of Suche and Steve, so he must be involved. Friends, no matter what you do, you have to help each other. And Tony loves the vibe of being with them. So, what's the point of spending a little money? After all, Tony knew very well the friends he had made. No one will become friends with themselves only for their own money. There was no danger on the way to pick up pepper pots. Not even any attacks. Although Pipo didn't know what happened. But in the face of Tony's serious expression, and even Mr. Superman and Captain America came over together. She naturally followed Tony's arrangement very smartly. Yes, it seemed to her. If there is no danger, then everyone will not come to pick her up together. On the way back, Pipo kept asking Tony what happened. She wasn't concerned about herself, she was worried about Tony. She was very afraid that Tony Stark would suffer from the kidnapping incident half a year ago again. Faced with Pipo's question, Tony didn't know what to say for a while. He could only look at Suche and the others for help. Seriously, Pipo is very important to Tony, so he doesn't want Pipo to know about Hydra. After all, the more things a person knows, the more dangerous they are. Look at Tony's begging gaze. Steve instantly turned into an old man who has been frozen for nearly 70 years, and that he is still not very familiar with the traffic rules in this world. So you have to drive the commercial vehicle carefully, don't talk to me, if you get distracted, it will look like a car accident. Watching Steve put on this look, Tony rolled his eyes speechlessly. Let alone 70 years. Even if you froze for 700 years and then revived, you can still drive a tank and play drifting. Let alone such a commercial vehicle. He turned his head and looked at Su Che and Natasha Romanoff in the back row. But I saw Natasha Romanoff pillowed on Su Che's lap, looking like she didn't have a good rest in the past 2 days, so she wanted the child to sleep. And Su Che made a gesture of tightening his mouth at Tony. It means that if I talk, I will make Natasha Romanoff rest. Have to. I can see it myself. These guys did it on purpose. And indeed it is. When Tony got out of the car to pick up Peebo, the three of Su Che had already discussed it. Let's create more opportunities for the two of them. The concubine Lang loves to get together as soon as possible. Isn't it just a confession? Why are you procrastinating? All the way back to the Avengers Alliance base. Back to the villa area in the Upper East Side that has not yet officially become the Avengers Alliance base. As soon as they got out of the car, Tony dragged Peebo towards his villa. When I left, I didn't forget to give Su Che 3 people an angry look, and I almost pointed at the 3 people's noses and said they were not mean enough. Seeing Tony's appearance, the 3 of them smiled, and then walked towards Su Dee's villa. Although this townhouse was just settled in today. But the furniture inside is all there is. The first thing Natasha Romanoff did after she came in was to scan the villa inside and out. Even all the hidden corners of the roof, partitions, inner walls, etc. have been checked with SHIELD's latest technology scanning equipment. After all, the house was given by that Sitwell, the member of Hydra. Who knows if there will be monitoring and monitoring equipment. Anyway, Natasha Romanoff is professional in this area. So when she made sure that there was no monitoring and monitoring equipment, Su Che and Steve felt relieved. What should we do next? Pass the squeezed fresh juice to Su Che and Natasha Romanoff each with a glass. Steve smiled and asked. Although I don't care about the bombing of the apartment, I always feel that we can't act as if nothing happened. At the very least, make it appear that Hydra people think we are going to investigate and retaliate. In this way, they can be exposed to a greater extent. Hearing Steve's words, Natasha Romanoff smiled while holding the fruit juice. In the past 2 days, I have captured 27 members of Hydra. But obviously, these 27 people were thrown out by Hydra for us to catch. Speaking of this, Natasha Romanoff looked at Su Che and Steve and said, however, Su and Steve's apartment was bombed. Although the scene and surrounding surveillance did not find any suspects. But my apartment building is different. Hearing what Natasha Romanoff said, Steve asked curiously, Natasha Romanoff, the person who bombed your apartment was caught on camera. That's not it. Facing Steve, Natasha Romanoff laughed, then put the juice on the coffee table, leaned on the sofa with her head propped up on one hand. I blew up that apartment of mine myself. Although 27 Hydra members have been arrested in the past 2 days, they are just to vent our anger or push out pawns to take the blame. It would be too boring if this matter was thrown away so easily. So, I'm going to add fire to them. It doesn't matter if they are in a hurry, or they are suspicious of each other. Anyway, it's just an apartment, maybe they will receive different miraculous effects. Hearing what Natasha Romanoff said, Steve nodded slightly. That's understandable, and there might be Nick Fury's plans behind it. Just as Natasha Romanoff was talking, the phone rang suddenly. Picking up the phone and taking a look, Nada said to Su and Steve, it's Director Nick Fury's call. After speaking, he connected the phone. Listening to Natasha Romanoff saying that it was Nick Fury's call, Su Che and Steve didn't care. It's about talking about what to do next. But as they talked, the two of them saw some subtle changes in Natasha Romanoff's expression. Yes, I understand. B.A. After hanging up the phone, Natasha Romanoff looked at Steve and Su Che with a strange expression. Maybe, we got this matter wrong from the beginning. It seems that the attack this time should not have much to do with Hydra. What did Nick Fury say? Hearing Natasha Romanoff say this with a weird expression on her face, Steve asked immediately. Just got a call from Nick Fury that someone else was attacked. This time the attack was not as simple as blowing up the apartment, but the attacker showed up. Also, the people who were attacked have nothing to do with the few of us. Who was attacked? Looking at Natasha Romanoff, Steve asked with a serious expression. Dr. Banner, Bruce Banner, a guy who got gamma-rayed and never died, and then turned into a big green guy when he got angry. Bruce Banner? Hearing Natasha Romanoff mention this name, Steve Rogers turned his head to look at Suche. He doesn't know who this Bruce Banner is. Dr. Bruce Banner can be said to be the most powerful combat force in the Avengers alliance in the early stage of the Marvel movie universe. Before meeting Thanos, he incarnated as Hulk, can say that he is not afraid of any enemies. Even in the later stages of the Avengers alliance, when Dr. Banner and Hulk became one, their strength should not be underestimated. It can even be said to have become stronger, because the Hulk at that time already possessed the wisdom and knowledge of Dr. Banner. Definitely, it can also be said that Dr. Banner has Hulk's powerful physique. Although the price is that Hulk's soul is gone. Steve didn't know who Dr. Banner was, or how powerful he was. But Natasha Romanoff does. So when Natasha Romanoff heard Nick Fury say in a serious tone that Dr. Banner was attacked, she didn't actually pay much attention. It's just that when I came to S.H.I.E.L.D., I saw that I was sitting there with a blanket drinking hot water, and my expression was not very good. Only then did Natasha Romanoff sensitively realize that things were not as simple as she imagined. He, Bruce Banner, is drinking hot water. You must know that except for the Oriental people like Sue who have this habit of drinking hot water, Westerners will choose to drink hot water unless they are rescued from extreme cold. But looking at Dr. Bruce Banner's slightly sluggish mental state, it's really similar to falling into an ice hole and being rescued. And besides that, Thor wearing a red cloak and holding Mjolnir is also sitting here bored. Seems like he's thinking about something. Thor is here too? So Doris' mission is over, and she retired. Boss, what exactly happened? Came to the conference hall and watched Nick Fury and Maria Hill standing there looking at Dr. Banner with serious expressions. Natasha Romanoff was the first to ask. Seeing Natasha Romanoff, several people walked in. Nick Fury said to Dr. Banner, "They are here, Dr. Banner, you can tell them what happened. I believe that no matter what kind of enemy it is, with a few of them there, at least there will be a way to deal with it." Watching Natasha Romanoff walk in with Suche and others, Nick Fury said to Bruce Banner, who didn't look too good. It was Steve Rogers who walked in together. Look at Thor in red cloak armor, holding Mjolnir. Can't help but look at him more. It turns out that this Mjolnir belongs to him. Maybe he sensed Steve Rogers' gaze. Thor raised his head and glanced at Steve, then turned his head to Nick Fury and said, "I don't care about anything, anyway. Before that Phil Coulson called me over. He said that as long as he can solve this trouble, then I'll get a lot of money. Let's talk about it first. How much money will I get this time?" Hearing Thor's words, Suche gave him a slightly surprised look. What's the situation? Thor actually asked for money. He actually regarded himself as a bounty hunter and asked for money? Though Thor probably doesn't know what a bounty hunter is. But this is not in line with his character. And after he picked up Mjolnir again, he was still on Earth and didn't return to Asgard? During Thor's changes, what did he miss? How on earth did Nick Fury get Thor to be trained? Also, really curious, facing Thor, he suddenly said this. Nick Fury turned to look at him. How much are you going to ask for? 3,000. No, at least $5,000. After thinking about it, Thor said very seriously. Jane helped me get the salary I deserved a month and a half ago, so judging from the salary I should have received at that time. This time, you have to give me at least 5,000 knives. Looking at Thor seriously calculating how much money he should take. Suche's expression remained unchanged, but he felt as if he had seen a ghost in his heart. What the hell did Nick Fury do to turn Thor into this? No, the mighty Asgard's first heir to the king, Thor, the mighty god of thunder, is now a man who recognizes money. Well, money is really important. But for some reason, Suche just felt that it was very ridiculous. Moreover, it's okay to ask for money, but it costs $5,000 for one action, which is not in line with his status. Not only Suche had a hellish mood, even Natasha Romanoff finds it a little weird. Doris. Buffalo. But Nick Fury didn't seem to care at all. Hearing Thor's quotation, he said directly, 5,000 is too much, so 25 million. No, I don't think about it if it's less than 4,000 and 5,000. Don't try to lie to me, I know the importance of money now. 3,000, 4,000, 3,005. Make a deal. After the discussion and negotiation, both Nick Fury and Thor were very satisfied. Only Suche pulled the chair over and sat down silently. God. If Heimdall told Queen Frigga and the god King Odin about this matter. Will Odin lead the army of Asgard to attack the Earth because of Thor's change? I just mentioned Thor a few times in my diary. Do you want to be so hard on Nick Fury? You are still a relatively honest person. Although I don't know your specific identity, but from Phil Coulson's point of view, your identity on Earth should be very high. Putting the hammer on the table, Thor said to Nick Fury, "You didn't deliberately lower the price because I like the Earth more. It makes me like you a little bit." After speaking, Thor took the money handed over by Maria Hill and began to count. Pity. If I knew a few months in advance how important money is on Earth. If only he could have a lot of money at that time. Would it be possible for Dialysi to live a better life? When I think of Doris, that gentle, kind, beautiful and considerate woman. Thor felt an inexplicable pain in his heart. She got better, but she couldn't see it. This is also the reason why I picked up Mjolnir myself, but didn't return to Asgard immediately. Doris's regret is that she didn't take a good look at this world. When I have saved enough money, I will definitely visit every corner of the Earth. Then tell her before her grave how beautiful the landscape is on Earth. Okay. Let's get down to business first. Seeing Suche always looked at Thor intentionally or unintentionally. Nick Fury knew, but Suche was wondering why there was such a big gap between the Thor in front of him and the Thor in his parallel world. After Nick Fury's narration, everyone knew what happened for a while. S.H.I.E.L.D. has been monitoring Dr. Bruce Banner. After all, as one of the existences with the ability to threaten the security of the Earth, S.H.I.E.L.D. cannot let Dr. Banner go. Especially after that street fight that happened in New York, and that abomination. Although Dr. Banner eventually escaped to an extremely remote place incognito. But S.H.I.E.L.D. never gave up on Dr. Banner. Just this morning, when Sitwell approached Suche and Steve and said that he would give away a villa as compensation. Dr. Banner, who had been hiding all this time, was suddenly attacked. Then Hulk appeared and fought the attackers. How is the result? Hearing the outline of the matter, Natasha Romanoff asked Dr. Banner seriously, "Dr. Banner, have you seen the appearance of the attacker? And if there is Hulk, then the attacker should not pose any threat to you bar." Facing Natasha Romanoff's inquiry, Bruce Banner held a water glass and hesitated for a moment. "I don't know too well. When Hulk showed up, I was overwhelmed, and I had no idea what Hulk was going through. But when I woke up, my whole body fell into a valley." But what? Although he didn't know what Hulk looked like, Steve Rogers asked immediately. "When I woke up I could feel the jitters coming back from the Hulk." Looking up at the crowd, Dr. Banner said with a complicated expression, "I don't know how to describe this feeling. It's an emotion that's never been there before. In fact, since the gamma rays, I have always regarded Hulk as a disease, and I have tried everything to eliminate this disease. But I know that Hulk has always been thoughtful, although he is purely like an ignorant child. But he has saved me many times." Speaking of this, Bruce Banner smiled wryly. "In order not to let Hulk show up and hurt others, I tried to end my life. At that time, I thought that as long as I died, Hulk would die too. Then I shot myself, and Hulk put the bullet." As he said that, Dr. Banner put down the cup in his hand and looked at the crowd, saying, "I have tried many methods, but none of them have any effect. But even when I shot myself, Hulk didn't have that uneasy feeling. But this attack, when I changed from Hulk back to myself. It's the first time I can intuitively feel the emotions from Hulk. It's not fear, it's not disgust, it's not fear, it's just that. I don't know how to describe it. It should be said that I don't want to face it, and I want to escape this feeling far away. It's like a child who has done something wrong and dare not face the eyes of teachers and parents." Hearing what Dr. Banner said, several people present looked at each other. If at first, Dr. Banner said, Hulk was in a state of trepidation, then everyone can still understand. But pure as apprehension, uneasiness, not fear. That's kind of interesting. Watching everyone think, Nick Fury said, "I used the S.H.I.E.L.D. satellite to record the scene." With that said, Nick Fury picked up the remote control and pressed it. Soon, the scene from this morning appeared directly on the screen behind him. In the screen, I saw Hulk clenched his fists and roared angrily towards the air, then suddenly jumped more than 10 meters high, as if he wanted to smash something. But soon, The Hulk in the air fell to the ground, then turned and ran. Its speed is even faster than when it escaped from New York. When running and jumping into a series of valleys, Hulk, who seemed to be unable to avoid it, became even more angry. The whole person was constantly punching and attacking, and even the ice stones in the valley around him began to collapse and shatter. After waving huge amounts of fists and beating around for a while, Hulk, who was originally angry, suddenly froze in place. Then he looked around in confusion, and stretched out his hand as if trying to grab something. Then a series of out-of-air explosions happened in the valley, but Hulk seemed to be defeated during the period. Not long after, Hulk lay quietly on the gravel-filled ground, as if thrown into the arms of Mother Earth. It's just that the appearance that gradually began to curl up is very similar to that of a child who has been wronged, crying to his mother again. Gradually, the Green Titan Hulk turned into Dr. Banner. The picture stops here. After stopping the video, Nick Fury looked at the crowd and said, "As you can see, no one knows exactly what happened." After that, the S.H.I.E.L.D. agent who was in charge of monitoring Dr. Banner found him and brought Dr. Banner back. "Guys, what do you think now?" Although the words were directed at the person in front of him, Nick Fury looked at Su-Che. It seems that the assailant was not found in the video. Arms folded, Tony Stark sat beside Su-Che. However, the explosion that appeared out of thin air in the video just now is a bit strange. Speaking of which, Tony Stark looked at Su-Che, Steve and Natasha Romanoff. "Dude, does this sudden explosion look like the apartment of the three of you was blown up?" The same explosion out of thin air, the same monitoring surface can't get any clues. Hearing what Tony said, Steve nodded in approval. But Su-Che pondered for a moment and said, "It's like spiritual magic." Psychic magic? Hearing Su-Che's words, everyone turned their attention to him. Psychic magic can invade people's thinking, and then let the magic invaded people's brains, to see some pictures. These pictures may be joyful, or they may be the deepest fears in a person's heart. Definitely, it can also leave an imprint on people's minds. It's like the angry Hulk in the video. You should have seen that at the very beginning, Hulk wanted to attack some enemies that could not be photographed by surveillance equipment, and the goal was very clear. But in the valley, psychic magic, I know this. Before Su-Che could finish speaking, Thor on the side immediately said, "Although we in Asgard have always admired warriors' force, we also have magic subjects. It's like my mother, she's very good at magic. My brother Loki learned all his magic from his mother. Loki knows mind magic." Speaking of this, Thor raised his finger and pointed at the screen. "But when we talk about mind magic, I suddenly thought of the big guy green on TV just now. He was attacking the invisible enemy. Actually, it may be a branch of fantasy magic, which is phantom duplication. This Loki has been used often before, that is, when the phantom duplication appears in front of us, we can see it, but the surveillance you just mentioned, it seems that we can't shoot it. It feels like talking to the air or fighting." Thor is right, in fact Loki's magic is very powerful. At least, compared to other people in Asgard who also took magic courses. Loki was the best of them all. Part of the reason is Loki's ability, and the other part is the personal teaching of Queen Frigg. But compared to magic, Loki considers his wit to be his most powerful weapon. Like now. Holding the Spear of Eternity, he personally eliminated Asgard's greatest enemy, the biological father who abandoned his newborn self on the steps of the temple, the monster in the eyes of Asgard's son-in-law. The famous king of Icelof. Loki wasn't satisfied after taking out Lof, the king of ice. Instead, he went directly to the Bifrost terminal and used the Eternal Gun to repel Heimdall who wanted to stop him. Get ready to use the power of Bifrost to utterly destroy the planet Jotunheim and slay all the Ice Titans once and for all. Only in this way, Asgard will rest easy. Only in this way, Asgard will no longer have to worry about the invasion of war. Loki believes that everything he does is right, and it's all for Asgard. So when the father who fell into eternal sleep suddenly appeared and took the Eternal Gun from his hand. Like a child, Loki excitedly told his father what he had done because of Asgard during his coma. He wanted to tell his father that he had done it, that he had solved Asgard's long-standing troubles. He looked at his father eagerly, wanting to be praised by his father. "I want my father to know that everything I do is no worse than Thor. I can also be worthy of his love." But when he saw Odin saying mercilessly, it was wrong for him to do so. Loki's heart, which was originally so excited, froze in an instant. Even he himself didn't realize that his hands were very steady when using magic. At this moment, he trembled unconsciously. It was a feeling of extreme disappointment. I never thought of competing with Thor for the throne, even though I am the second heir to Asgard. What I did was entirely for Asgard, and I even did not hesitate to kill my biological father for this. But in the end, what he got in exchange was Li's negation time and time again. Obviously everything I did was for him, for Asgard. But why can he be so stingy that he can't even praise himself? Looking down at his hands, Lu Ji suddenly laughed. Right. Perhaps, because I am not his own. So no matter what you do, no matter what you pay for Asgard, he will always deny himself. Looking up at Odin, Loki took 2 steps back with his arms outstretched. At this moment, Lu Ji really felt desperate. Perhaps in his heart, what he, the adopted son of the Ice Titan, the monster's son, did was wrong. Turn around without any hesitation, and then jump off the Bifrost. Even if the space below is turbulent, even if one is involved in it, one's body will be smashed to pieces. But at this moment, Loki felt that maybe this was a kind of relief. Earth. I definitely know some magic, not as proficient as Loki, but I think. The garden inside the Avengers' unnamed base. Looking at the crowd, Thor, who was holding the hammer, had just spoken halfway, but suddenly seemed to feel something. Suddenly raised his head and looked towards the sky. What's wrong? Seeing that Thor was halfway through speaking, he suddenly looked towards the sky. Everyone subconsciously raised their heads to look at the blue sky. White clouds are floating in the clear sky. Everything is so peaceful and comfortable. It seems that there is nothing worth paying attention to at all. Guys, I might have to go back to Asgard first. Standing up to the side, Thor looked at the crowd with a hammer in his hand and said, although I don't know what happened to Asgard, Heimdall called me just now. Don't worry, if there is nothing particularly important, then I will return to Earth soon. So help me tell that guy in the blindfold that the money will not be refunded, and I will come back and help you solve this matter together. Oh, by the way, if you can meet Jane Foster, please help me to say thank you to her. During the time when Doris left, she has been helping. A beam of colorful rainbow energy hits Thor from the blue sky. Everyone, I'll take a step first, when the time comes. After speaking, everyone saw Thor, who was shrouded in the Bifrost teleportation array, disappear in front of them. Wow, is this a portal or something? It's really convenient. Get up and go to the place where Thor disappeared, watching a round Bifrost mark left on the lawn, which resembles the trace of charcoal fire. Tony Stark looked at Su Che and complained. This guy really doesn't pay attention to environmental protection at all. Besides, Sue, the next time he comes back from that Asgard, you must ask him for money. After all, he left his imprint on the lawn in your yard. Hearing Tony's words, everyone smiled and said nothing. On the other hand, Natasha Romanoff looked at Steve and said, I saw you staring at Thor's hammer just now. Steve, do you have any thoughts? I have no idea. Hearing Natasha Romanoff's question, Steve smiled and shook his head. Just looking at the crowd, Steve hesitated for a moment. I don't know why, but when I watched him take the money from Maria Hill, I always felt. Maybe this is his personal habit. Steve still couldn't speak ill of people behind their backs. Even though, he always felt that Thor gave him an inexplicable sense of disobedience. Definitely, this sense of incongruity may have something to do with the Mjolnir. After all, when I picked up Mjolnir, the belief that I had always held in my heart became clearer. So Steve felt that the person who could use that Mjolnir should be the same as himself. Nah. Next you bring Tien Da and Pietro back. Looking at Natasha Romanoff, Su Che said softly, now that we have confirmed that the attackers last time, including the attackers against Dr. Banner, were not members of Hydra. Then Wanda and Pietro are safest with us. Since the attacker was able to find Dr. Banner, who has been hiding all this time, he might not be able to find Barton's farm. Definitely, if Barton wants to, then he might as well move his family here. Tony shouldn't mind. How could you mind? Listening to Su Che's arrangement, Tony Stark spread his hands and said, I bought all this villa area and used it as a base for those of us. There are empty houses everywhere. As long as they can be approved by us, the more people there are, the better. Having said that, Tony looked at Bruce Banner, who was sitting on the sidelines and kept silent all the time, and said, Another word, Dr. Banner. I really appreciate that you can become that Green Hulk when you get angry. When Natasha Romanoff came back with Wanda and Pietro, Barton did not choose to come with him, let alone his wife, Mockingjay Birdlora. This has nothing to do with trusting Su Che at all. The main purpose is that Ba and Laura don't want to appear in people's eyes too much. According to Barton, a Silver Moon Knight, an Iron Man, and a Magnesium Captain are enough to attract attention. Discussions about these three people on the internet have not stopped until now. He had a hunch that this group of people would definitely attract more attention in the future. So when there are no tasks, it is better to stay and enjoy life on the farm with your wife Laura. Regarding Barton's choice, to be honest, Su Che didn't have any surprises. In fact, even at the end of the Avengers alliance, Barton did not choose to expose his wife and children. Su Che was more concerned about the second enemy he had created. Seems like things are going the other way, but this is what Su Che likes to see. After all, designing the first enemy, Olivia Temple, was too anticlimactic. So this time, definitely the more real the better. And including Olivia Temple, in addition to setting an identity background and ability for them when I designed it myself. Others have a very high degree of freedom with others. As for whether it will be played off, Su Che said that he is not worried. After all, Su Di is very clear about the fatal weakness of every enemy produced by the system. It was even created by Su Che himself. So compared to this, Su Che looked forward to the second enemy being beheaded. Who is the new diary quota? Well, I have to curse here. Damn Nick. Heart of Stone. Trust. Fury. At the same time. Deal. I love the plan. Looking at the Titan Thanos sitting on the stone throne in front of him. Loki stood at the bottom of the steps, with that charming smile still on his face. I am the second prince of Asgard, the first in line to inherit the throne of Jotunheim. Whether it's Asgard or Earth, or Jotunheim, as long as you are willing to help me become a real king, then I can help you bring back the space gem. Although I don't understand why the Earth is so weak, but you are not willing to take the initiative to go there. As soon as Loki's voice fell, the leader of Chitauri instantly turned into a phantom and appeared beside Loki, and the weapon in his hand was directly on Loki's neck. Facing the master, you'd better show some respect, otherwise I will immediately take away your humble ant-like life. Facing the Chitauri leader who threatened by sticking it to his ear. Loki frowned and tilted his head. I don't know if he is avoiding the weapon on his neck. Or because the tone of this Chitauri leader is not so fresh. I've been waiting for an opportunity. He waved his hand casually, signaling the Chitauri leader to back down. After he stepped back with great respect, Thanos took off his helmet and put it on the double-edged sword beside him. Over time, I've been doing the right thing. This universe is on the verge of destruction. Only by eliminating half of the life in the universe can the universe be kept in balance and continue to be maintained. Although this process is full of blood, brutality, and wailing. But one day, everyone will understand me. Saying this, Thanos glanced at Gamora below the throne. There are too many beings in the universe, and I may not be able to save the universe until the end of my life. So, I need to collect all the infinite gems, and then just snap my fingers to wipe out half of the lives. So, Asgardians, go help me to that fragile Earth, and bring me the space gem. I will fulfill my promise and reward you with the Earth. Listening to Thanos' words, Loki spread his arms and laughed. It's a fair deal, but how do I find the space gem? Use this. Just ask Proxima Midnight to hand over the psychic scepter to Loki. Thanos said. Life on Earth is researching space gems. Chitauri leaders will use their technology to help you, and use the energy of spiritual power to stimulate space gems, this special infinite gems. When the channel is opened, you can take Chitauri to rule the Earth. Looking at the psychic scepter in his hand, Loki raised his eyebrows. I like this kind of exciting, chaotic, brother-in-law picture. I figured my stupid big brother would let out a delightful growl when I invaded with the Chitauri. After watching Loki being led down by the Chitauri leader. Xingyun Zhuanba. Father, I don't understand. For an existence as weak as the Earth, why do we have to let this Asgard who was swept to the planet Chitauri by space turbulence do it? Father, as long as you are willing, then you don't even need to dispatch Chitauri. As long as you lead, then we will definitely break the Earth. Facing Nebula's request, Thanos shook his head. You don't understand, Nebula. the Earth is not as fragile as you think. If we descend to Earth in person, then that venerable Asgardian will show up to stop us. This man of Asgard, Loki, was full of hatred, prejudice, and ridiculous ambition. He led Chitauri to appear, and naturally it will not bring more trouble. Having said that, Thanos looked at Gamora, who was fiddling with the dagger. My daughter, do you understand? Facing Thanos' question, Gamora nodded lightly. It's just a tool. Things that can be done with tools only need to meet the small requirements of the tools originally, and unexpected results can be achieved. Listening, Gamora understood what she meant. Thanos nodded in relief. He never likes to explain, just like what he said just now. Although it was Nebula who asked, but he was speaking more to Gamora. After all, in Thanos' heart, Gamora is his favorite daughter. Wait until I save this universe and finish everything. I will give everything that belongs to me to Gamora. Then I will return to Titan to live a hermit life. Thanos' words were clearly educational. However, after hearing Gamora's answer, Nebula's eyes shone with deep jealousy. All along, my father loves his elder sister the most. Obviously I am no worse than her. Huh? Why is this line so familiar? Wait, isn't that Loki's line? Tisk. It seems that the fate of Nebula and Loki are really very similar. If these two people with the same fate have been in contact for a long time. Wait. Loki and Nebula are not in love, so what about Hill? For half a month, another attack on members of the yet-to-be-established Avengers alliance was not discovered. Although everyone knows, as long as the attacker is not caught. So everything is not completely over yet. But just like what Steve said, you can't wear cotton clothes all year round just because you are worried about the cold weather. Everyone's life is gradually getting back to normal. Definitely, if you use Suche's words, then it should be more like listening to Lala and not growing crops. Although they may not understand this proverb. During this period, Suche wrote a diary because the Avengers Alliance base gradually took shape. In the diary, it is said that the Avengers Alliance is only short of Loki taking Chitauri to invade the Earth, and the Avengers Alliance can be formally established. Everything else works fine. Including the past half a month, Wanda always likes to be by her side as a girlfriend, and sometimes she doesn't even go back to sleep at night. But Natasha Romanoff didn't stop either. But those things didn't happen. After all, Wanda is only 15 now. There are still more than 7 months until my 16th birthday. Not so myself. Right. After all, I can afford to wait. But there is one thing to say, the 15-year-old Wanda is already very beautiful and mature. Maybe all girls in the West are like this. And besides being a bit jerky at the beginning, the gentle and skillful hands and mouth gradually became very powerful. After starting the night raid as a girlfriend, Suche has the absolute right to speak in this matter. As for why this happens, according to Natasha Romanoff, she has paid an extra sum of money for paid channels this month. Thought it was Pietro watching, but looking at Pietro's confused eyes, Natasha Romanoff knew what was going on. So she never stopped Wanda from staying at Suche's house. Definitely during this period, Dr. Banner has been living in the Avengers Alliance base. To prevent something like this from happening again. The Avengers Alliance is very peaceful, but S.H.I.E.L.D. is not peaceful at the moment. Dark Matter Research Base. Director, Tesseract's energy base fluctuations have been going on for 3 days. Watching Nick Fury and Maria Hill step off the helicopter, Phil Coulson immediately stepped forward and reported. According to Dr. Sylvig, the Tesseract seems to be bursting with energy on its own, and it can't be closed at all. For safety reasons, I have started the evacuation of scientific researchers and their families. While walking into the department of the Dark Matter Research Base, Phil Coulson reports. Dr. Sylvig is here, and Jane Foster. Pausing to look at Phil Coulson. Someone must be watching her. Yes, sir. Lady Jane Foster has returned to New York to resume her normal life since Thor took Mjolnir. The man in charge of watching her has been integrated into her life as a best friend, making sure that no other man accosts Queen Jane Foster until Thor returns to Earth. Having said that, Phil Coulson hesitated for a moment. Speak up if you have anything to say. While walking towards the inner passage of the Dark Matter base, Nick Fury said. Director, I always feel that this is not very good. Open the elevator and enter the elevator with Nick Fury and Maria Hill. Director, everyone has the right to their own life, whether it's dating, making friends, or other life trajectories. This is the most basic. Are you trying to say that by doing this we violate Jane Foster's most basic life choice? Yes, Chief. The elevator door opened, and Phil Coulson followed Nick Fury and said, Ms. Jane Foster is an independent individual, although after the Doris incident, Thor has a very high affection for Ms. Jane Foster. But this favorability is more towards friends, we can't because of this. Does Jane Foster know that the man she's befriending is our S.H.I.E.L.D. agent? She doesn't know. And how does she feel about Thor? Jane Foster has a lot of feelings for Thor, based on the contact in the past few months and what Doris said. Then this is enough. I turned my head and glanced at Phil Coulson. I know what you're thinking, but Phil Coulson, you have to remember that a person's trajectory and gears of fate can be changed, but they cannot lose the responsibility that fate entrusts to them. Also, from now on, I don't want to hear anyone mention the name Doris, understand? Yes, sir. Listening to the instructions given by Nick Fury, Phil Coulson pursed his lips, then nodded slightly. Phil Coulson, I know your character, but many things are not as bad as you think. At least as far as Jane Foster is concerned, I just let her embrace the responsibility that fate has placed on her. Besides, since Doris has already returned to Eagle's Nest, let her know when you have time, and act lightly. The death rate should not exceed 20%. S.H.I.E.L.D. needs a lot of fresh blood in the future. Hearing the order from the chief, Phil Coulson nodded immediately. However, Phil Coulson was not sure about persuading Doris. After all, when Doris died, she was in a very bad mood. At that time, I was worried that I would be caught by her and beaten up because of my comforting words. Let Phil Coulson direct the evacuation. Nick Fury and Maria Hill continued to walk towards the underground base. On the way, you're hiding a lot of things from me, Nick, you should know that I'm on your side. After watching Phil Coulson leave, Maria Hill, who had been silent all the time, said seriously, including the Doris incident, God, how did you make up your mind to let Doris face that Thor? Can't Doris be allowed to stay peacefully until retirement? Listening to Hill's words, he looked at Tesseract's empty research room not far ahead. Nick Fury glanced at Hill. It's not that I don't want to tell you a lot of things, Hill, I can't tell you. It has nothing to do with whether I trust you or not. It's still the same sentence, when one day you also get the gift of fate, then you will understand everything I did today. Including, what's about to happen? What's about to happen? Hearing what Nick Fury said, Hill frowned even more. Just out of credit for Nick Fury, Maria Hill didn't press on any further. An empty basement research room. Dr. Sylvig, why did Tesseract's energy riot? Come to Dr. Sylvager and look at the Tesseract emitting bursts of blue light ripples at the moment. Nick Fury asked. I don't know, but from the time when the Tesseract energy started to spread very steadily, until now the energy has become a bit violent. No one has touched it during this process. That Eagle Boy has been watching from above, and he can testify for me. But just like the direction of my research for more than 2 months, I always feel that Tesseract is more like a door leading to the universe. As for the key to the gate, it seems to be in our hands, but in fact, the opposite party may not have this key. Ants and shoes, a metaphor for when Loki and Nick Fury first met. Because in Loki's impression, he is a god in shoes. And the people on Earth are just ants that can be crushed to death by shoes at any time. At least he thought so before the Avengers alliance defeated him with their own hands. So, when Loki got hold of Barton and Dr. Sylvig, and escaped with the Tesseract. Nick Fury stood up from the ground on his arms. It's really not cute at all. Standing up and looking at the mess around, many S.H.I.E.L.D. agents were knocked down to the ground. So, this Loki, who claims to be the god of Asgard, also has to go through a painful education again and again before he becomes a good person recorded in the Black Gold Diary? But this good guy really needs to be put in double quotes. Talking to himself, Nick Fury took out his mobile phone and called Hill. Hill, Kaylin Tay and Dr. Sylvig were taken away by Loki, a family that claims to be a god. Find a way to immediately find the group of people headed by Sue and form them into Avengers. While speaking, Nick Fury raised his head and looked at the underground research room where cracks were constantly appearing. Mary fuck. After cursing, Nick Fury ran directly outside. At the same time, what? After receiving the call from Hill, Natasha Romanoff, who was having dinner, suddenly became serious. I see. After hanging up the phone, Natasha Romanoff raised his hand and rubbed Wanda and Pietro's heads with a smile. My sister has some problems, so I need to find Sue and the others to solve them together. Anyway, the school is on holiday now, and my sister will put the food in the refrigerator for you. Take it out and heat it up. In addition, there is some money in the drawer for you, so if you don't like to eat the food in the refrigerator, you can call outside the store. Oh, by the way, in a few months you will be able to take the driver's license test at the age of 16. I have already booked the car. After your 16th birthday and pass the driver's license test, you will be able to have your own car. Listening to Natasha Romanoff's words, Wanda and Pietro nodded. It's just that the two looked at Natasha Romanoff with a little worry. After all, from the tone of Natasha Romanoff, it seems very serious. Is it dangerous? Don't worry, it's okay, and everything is expected. After rubbing the heads of Wanda and Pietro, Natasha Romanoff got up and went to Sudi's villa. Seeing sister Natasha Romanoff get up and leave, Pietro looked at the dinner on the table. My sister still treats us as children. Obviously we are almost 16 years old. This is normal. After all, my sister is our guardian. Even if we are 20 or 30 years old, we are still children in her eyes. Wanda picked up the food and took a bite, then seemed to think of something. His face was slightly hot, and then he said softly, "It's really not a child anymore. You didn't live at home these days, but ran directly to Sus' house for the night." Putting down the tableware, Pietro turned his head to look at Wanda and said seriously, "Wanda, as big brother, I think we need to have a good talk. After all." Before he finished speaking, Pietro saw Wanda staring at him blankly. Wei Wei was silent for a while. Pietro nodded resolutely. "Okay, you're the older sister, as long as you're happy anyway. What can I do? Just this little sister. What else can I do if I don't spoil her?" Seeing Pietro's appearance, Wanda couldn't help laughing. "Okay, it's fine. Don't worry, Pietro, I know what I want and what I can and shouldn't do." "Oh, it's strange if you know." Muttering a word in a low voice, Pietro continued to eat dinner. Inside Suche's villa. Why such a sullen expression? Looking at Suche, Natasha Romanoff folded her arms and said, "I just received a call from Hill, and Hill on the other end of the phone said that a prince from Asgard who claimed to be Loki stole the Tesseract from the S.H.I.E.L.D. Dark Matter research base. And this guy should use something similar to a Scepter of Fate to control Barton and Dr. Silverig together." Speaking of this, Natasha Romanoff said seriously, "So Sue, Nick Fury hopes that we can help out. After all, this time, let's look at the news revealed by Loki. This is very likely to be the first official war between the Earth and aliens." Hear Natasha Romanoff's serious expression. Suche nodded slightly. But he didn't say anything, but looked at the moon outside, with a hint of melancholy in his eyes, and said, "Nah, do you know what day it is today? Anything special? Isn't Christmas over? Today is Chinese New Year." Turning his head to look at Natasha Romanoff, Suche leaned on the sofa and said softly, "Over there, today is the most important song in 10 years. It is also the most important 10 days among all festivals. According to the custom, every year on this day, all our family members will gather together. I just never thought that Loki would choose this day to come. To be honest, it has been almost a year since I came to this world. Ordinary words are fine. But, on the day of Chinese New Year, Suche really can't restrain the yearning in his heart. Forcibly suppressing this longing, because the enemy's mind was uncontrollable, he began to think wildly. This year, Captain America was discovered ahead of time and recovered from the ice ahead of time. This year, Thor was exiled early to pick up Mjolnir early. It seems that this also caused Loki on Asgard's side to complete the murder of Lof ahead of schedule. It's just that Thor was on Earth at that time. How did Loki fall from Bifrost? Odin can't do it himself and force Loki to jump off the bridge. Seeing Suche thinking, Natasha Romanoff thought he was thinking about the world that originally belonged to him. Yes, Chinese New Year. According to Sue, this is the most important day of the year. It is also a day for family reunions, so it's normal for him to miss his world. Walking forward without speaking, Natasha Romanoff just gently held Su Minin. He is a lonely person in this world, why not himself? Yelena, well. Let's go, Shuo Shi and Steve and Dr. Na. Seeing the comfort in Natasha Romanoff's eyes, Suche smiled. Immediately, the calmness and wisdom of the past were restored. At least, in the eyes of Natasha Romanoff, Suche has always been so calm and wise. At night, on a calm sea, a ship with seemingly huge amounts of floating in the middle of the sea. Snowflakes kept falling above the night sky, but the people on the battleship didn't feel any appreciation at all at the moment. Hundreds of people are constantly busy. Towing, cleaning, testing. One job after another is constantly repeated on this night. It seems that this huge amounts of battleship platform is about to have a fierce war. Take the Kun-style fighter and slowly land on the platform of the battleship Nuada. Su Che and several people got off from the Quinjet fighter. It's really a big deal. Looking at this aerospace aircraft carrier, Tony Stark said with emotion, "I want to build one and play with it." "This is not your toy, Tony, you should wait until this matter is over, and upgrade your armor properly. It's best to follow what Su said, and create a nano armor, which will save a lot of trouble." Seeing Tony carrying the box containing the Mark armor, Natasha Romanoff replied with a smile. "Natasha Romanoff, stay away from Su in the future. I found out that you have learned from Su." Listening to Natasha Romanoff, King himself, Tony Stark shrugged. Although, he likes friends joking with each other like this. "What are you looking at?" When I came to Su Che, I looked at Su Che, who seemed to be catching snowflakes with his hands outstretched. Natasha Romanoff asked with a smile, "Haven't seen snow before?" "Definitely ever seen snow just above sea level, and this is the first time." Looking at Natasha Romanoff, Su Che smiled softly. "It is indeed beautiful, but if possible, I would rather not see this scene. Heizhongjiao always brings back memories of when I drove a fighter plane into the ice 70 years ago." Hearing what Su Che said, Steve, who was holding a shield on the side, made a joke. Immediately, it was ridiculed by Tony. "Wow, as expected of an old man, I really like to talk about the past." "But Steve, why didn't you jump off the plane before it crashed? Don't say you didn't have a parachute or something." Listening to Tony's words, Steve turned his head and pointed to the box in his hand. "Although I don't know what nano armor is, I don't think there are many people who carry boxes and prepare to go to the battlefield." "Oh, I remembered, logistics soldiers often do this kind of work. So, Mr. Tony Stark, our great logistician, are you ready for what we need to fight?" "Depend on." A middle finger to Steve. "You actually asked Tang Ben to be in charge of your logistics?" Not to mention, I bought a villa area to build a base, and I also help maintain weapons and update equipment. It seems to be similar to logistics." Dr. Banner, who was a little silent at the side, watched a few people bickering, and a trace of envy flashed in his eyes. Seriously, no one wants to be part of this harmonious atmosphere. For more than half a month, Dr. Banner also lived in the group base. He knew very well that no one in this small group was common. Even Natasha Romanoff is far more deceitful than the common. If I also join them, then among this group of people, I will not appear to be such a weirdo. But Dr. Banner also knows that he is just like the Thor who went to Asgard on the way. Although I also live here, I haven't fully integrated into the team yet. And living here because that Nick Fury wanted them to help himself when he was attacked. This does not mean that he has joined them, but from what they said, it seems that the first gathering was to destroy the Hydra base in Sokovia. After that incident, although no one mentioned it, but unconsciously formed a small team. While these guys are always bantering each other, if someone gets stuck, the rest of the team will come along and help. Seriously, this makes Dr. Banner very envious. If I remember correctly, at the beginning, it seemed that an agent from S.H.I.E.L.D. found me and said that I hoped that I could help destroy the Hydra base incident in Sokovia. But that time, don't accept it yourself. If I hadn't rejected it back then, maybe I would be a part of this team now." Thinking of this, a rare seriousness flashed in Dr. Banner's eyes. Perhaps this time Nick Fury asked the incident of this small team, he can play his own value. Maybe, you can join them later. Dr. Banner believes that only by allowing them to discover their own value, can they have the opportunity to join them. It's normal to think so, in Dr. Banner's opinion, among the small team headed by Su Che. Everyone is not a common person, they are all existences that can be taken out casually. Whether it's the mighty Silver Moon Knight Su Che, or the legendary hero Captain Rogers. Or Tony, elite agents Natasha Romanoff and Barton, with their wealth and wisdom guaranteed. They should not absorb people who are worthless. He has 7 degrees himself, plus he can become a mighty Hulk when he gets angry. As long as I can help this time, I can reflect my own value. Then you are eligible to join them. This can't be blamed on Dr. Banner's thinking. After all, how could the lonely Bruce Banner, who has been hiding all this time, not want a place to survive? People are social animals, so naturally I don't want to be alone and hiding in Tibet all the time. What are you thinking, Dr. Banner? Looking at Bruce Banner, who had been thinking, Tony Stark asked curiously as he walked. Nothing, nothing. Seeing Tony looking at himself, Dr. Banner smiled shyly. I was thinking. This is the second time I have come to a place related to S.H.I.E.L.D. The first time was the last time we met at S.H.I.E.L.D. and you know, whenever I get angry, I turn into that Hulk who only knows how to F***K. That's why S.H.I.E.L.D. wanted to grab me and put me in a transparent and airtight jar and throw it into the bottom of the ocean. Having said that, Dr. Banner took a deep breath and laughed. I don't know if that transparent jar is still there. It's still there. Hearing Dr. Banner's words, Natasha Romanoff, who was leading the crowd to the interior of the aerospace carrier, turned her head and smiled. The transparent jar still exists, and it's on the aerospace carrier. So Dr. Banner, I hope you can control it. Hold your temper. Hope so. Facing Natasha Romanoff's joke, Dr. Banner spread his hands. However, doesn't that mean that if S.H.I.E.L.D. wants to deal with us, then there is no escape for us here? Listen to Dr. Banner make a rare joke. Steve on the side pointed to Su Che in front and said to Bruce Banner, "Don't worry, Bruce. This is the sea." That's right. Tony Stark answered on the other side. Above the sea, Su is an invincible existence.